Daniel's day started like any other. He sat on the crowded subway, the rhythmic clatter of the train filling the space. People around him stared at their phones, minding their own business, the city moving outside the windows as it always did. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but there was something in the air that morning, something different. Sitting beside him, just like every other day, was a woman. She wasn't striking at first glance, not the kind to stand out in a crowded car. She had dark brown hair, tied back neatly in a low ponytail, and wore a simple gray sweater and black pants. Her face was soft, unassuming, her features barely memorable, but there was something about the way she sat that Daniel couldn't shake off. Her posture was perfect, straight-backed, like she was carrying an invisible weight that others couldn't see. She didn't fidget like the rest of the commuters. She wasn't checking her phone or glancing around like everyone else. Her eyes were focused forward, but not in the way someone waits for their stop. It was like she was looking beyond the train, beyond the crowd, as if she was seeing something far away. For some reason, Daniel couldn't bring himself to ignore her. He tried not to stare, but she seemed to have this calmness, this quiet authority that drew his attention. Her presence was not loud or demanding, but it was there, undeniable, and it puzzled him. How could someone so ordinary seem so otherworldly? For a week, he took the same train, and every day she sat there beside him. He noticed little things that made him think there was more to her than met the eye. The way her eyes scanned the room, not in curiosity, but with purpose. The way she seemed unaffected by the hustle of the city around her, as if the noise, the chaos, the people were just background noise to her. It was almost as if she were in a different world, a world that Daniel couldn't understand. At first, he dismissed it. Maybe she was just one of those people who like to keep to themselves. But the more he saw her, the more he became certain that she wasn't like the others. There was something else. He just couldn't put his finger on it. He found himself looking forward to seeing her every morning. He never spoke to her, and she never spoke to him. It was as if they existed in parallel, two separate lives crossing paths every day. He would sit quietly, trying to concentrate on his work or the book in his hands, but his attention would always drift back to her. The train ride would end, and they would both get off at the same stop, walking in the same direction, yet never exchanging a word. It was routine. Until one fateful morning. It was a rainy day, the kind of day when the sky was gray, and the streets seemed to swallow the sound of the world. As Daniel stepped onto the train, something felt off. The usual crowd was there, people with tired faces, glued to their phones, as always, but the woman was already seated, not in her usual spot, but across the aisle. It was strange. Daniel had never seen her take a different seat. She was looking out the window, the faintest hint of a frown on her lips. Daniel hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should take the seat next to her. He'd never done it before. There was something about sitting beside her that felt intimate, almost too personal. But something urged him forward. He took the seat beside her. The moment he sat down, the air seemed to shift. It was subtle, but Daniel could feel it. A strange tension, as though the space between them suddenly held more weight. The woman didn't turn to acknowledge him, didn't give him a glance, but there was something different about her that day. She seemed more aware of her surroundings, more alert. Daniel felt the need to speak, to break the silence that hung between them. But when he opened his mouth, the words caught in his throat. He had no idea why. It was just a woman, just a person like anyone else. Yet there was an intensity to her that made him feel small. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. The train slowed, and the woman shifted in her seat, her eyes flickering towards the door. Daniel followed her gaze, expecting to see someone standing at the platform. But there was no one. The train screeched to a halt, and the silence in the car seemed to grow, heavier than before. It was then that something unexpected happened. A figure appeared at the door, a man dressed in a black trench coat. His eyes scanned the train car, his gaze moving across the passengers until it locked onto Daniel. The man's eyes were dark, cold. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could react, the woman beside him stood up, her movements swift and deliberate. She didn't hesitate. Her hand almost instinctively reached out, and Daniel saw something he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't the gesture of a simple commuter. Her hand was steady, her body poised in a way that suggested she was not just reacting to a threat, but anticipating it. The man in the trench coat took a step forward, but before he could get any closer, the woman's voice rang out, soft yet commanding. "Stay back," she said, her tone sharp and unwavering. It was a command, not a plea. For a moment the air was still. The man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. Daniel watched, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't understand what was happening. Who was this woman? The figure hesitated, then slowly backed away, vanishing into the crowd at the next stop. The train doors closed, and the car was once again filled with the hum of commuters. But Daniel's world had shifted. He turned to the woman, his mind racing. She looked down at him, her face as calm as ever, but now there was something more to her eyes. A hidden depth, a hidden power. She was no longer just a woman sitting beside him. "Who are you?" Daniel whispered, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. She looked at him for a moment, her gaze unreadable. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "I'm not who you think I am." Daniel's mind raced. The man in the trench coat, the way she had reacted, the air of command she carried with her, it all pointed to something far greater than a simple commuter. He couldn't place it, but in that moment he knew he was sitting beside someone extraordinary. As the train pulled into the next station, the woman stood up, her movements graceful and sure. Daniel didn't know what to say, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from her. She gave him a small nod. "This is where I get off," she said quietly. With that, she disappeared into the crowd. But the mystery remained. Daniel's ordinary commute had just been turned upside down. The woman who sat beside him every day, the one who seemed so ordinary, was anything but. Daniel sat there, frozen, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The woman who sat beside him, the quiet, unassuming commuter, was no ordinary person. He had known that she was different somehow, but the moment she had stood up and spoken with such calm authority, everything changed. The train was still moving, but Daniel felt as if time had stopped. His thoughts were a blur, racing through every possible explanation. Who was she? Why did she act like that? Who was the man in the trench coat? And most importantly, why had the woman chosen to speak to him at all? He had seen the strange figure step into the train, a dark silhouette in a sea of commuters. The way he had looked at Daniel with those cold eyes, sending a chill down his spine, still lingered in his mind. But what was most unsettling was the woman's response. The way she stood, poised and calm, and the way her voice had carried so much weight, so much authority, it was as though she wasn't just a passenger on the train, but something far beyond. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He had to make sense of it. He looked out the window, but the city outside was a blur, the familiar sights of his daily routine now meaningless in the face of what had just occurred. He had questions. Too many questions. But the answers seemed too far out of reach. The rest of the journey was uneventful. The usual mix of commuters came and went, oblivious to the strange encounter that had just happened. But for Daniel, nothing was ordinary anymore. When he finally reached his stop, he got off the train mechanically, his body moving on autopilot. He was still in shock, still trying to make sense of the bizarre events that had unfolded. As he walked towards the exit of the station, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from his friend, Tom. "Hey, want to grab a drink after work?" Daniel paused, his fingers hovering over the screen. A drink sounded good. Maybe some distraction would help clear his mind. He quickly typed back, agreeing to meet Tom. He needed something, anything, to shake off the unease that had settled over him. The evening passed in a haze. Tom talked about work, the latest news, and the usual banter, but Daniel couldn't focus on any of it. His thoughts kept drifting back to the woman on the train. Who was she? Why did she act the way she did? What was her connection to the strange man in the trench coat? And why had she spoken to him, of all people? By the time he returned home, his mind was still spinning. He sat at his desk, staring at the screen in front of him, but the words blurred together. He couldn't concentrate. His usual routine felt out of place, as though something had shifted in the very fabric of his life. The ordinary world he had once known now seemed full of mysteries. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Daniel tossed and turned, his mind replaying the scene over and over again. He saw the woman's face, calm yet intense, her eyes filled with something far deeper than he had ever imagined. He saw the way she had handled the man in the trench coat, not with fear or hesitation, but with complete confidence. It was as if she knew exactly what to do. When he finally drifted off to sleep, his dreams were filled with strange images. He dreamed of a vast palace, its walls gleaming with an otherworldly light. He saw the woman standing in front of a throne, her presence commanding and regal. But there was something else in the dream too, a shadow lurking in the corners, a threat that loomed over everything. The next morning, Daniel awoke with a start, his heart racing. The dream had been so vivid, so real. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. It was just a dream, he told himself. Just a dream. But even as he tried to convince himself, he knew something had changed. The ordinary world he had once known no longer felt the same. He prepared for work mechanically, his mind still on the woman and the strange events of the previous day. The train ride was the same as always, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. As he entered the subway station, he scanned the crowd, his eyes automatically searching for her. But she wasn't there. For the rest of the ride, Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. It was as if the world had returned to normal, but he wasn't sure if he wanted it to. The encounter had shaken him, yes, but it had also sparked something inside him, a curiosity that he couldn't ignore. He wanted to know more.
He wanted to understand what had happened. The days passed in a blur.
Every morning, Daniel rode the train, his eyes scanning the crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman. But she never appeared again. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. His routine began to feel empty without her. The usual bustle of the city, the noise, the faces, they all seemed distant, unimportant. The world was still the same, but it was no longer the world he had known. He couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play, something he was meant to be a part of. Then, one evening, as Daniel was walking home from work, he saw her again. She was standing at the corner of the street, just outside his building, her eyes focused on him. He stopped in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. It was her, the woman from the train. She hadn't changed, still wearing the same simple clothes, but there was something different in the way she looked at him now. Her expression was softer, almost as if she had been waiting for him. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. What was she doing here? And why was she looking at him like that? He felt the weight of her gaze, and for a moment he didn't know what to do. Should he approach her? Should he ask her what was going on? But before he could make a move, she spoke. "Daniel," she said, her voice calm but carrying a hint of urgency, "I need to talk to you." He took a step forward, his mind racing. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The answers he had been seeking were just a few steps away, but he couldn't help the feeling of unease that crept over him. What did she want? And what would she say next? "Come with me," she said, turning towards the alleyway. There was no time to think, no time for questions. Without thinking, Daniel followed her. As they walked, the street seemed to fade away. The noise, the people, everything melted into the background. All that mattered was her, the mysterious woman who had changed everything for him. When they reached the alley, she stopped and turned to face him. Her eyes were serious now, her gaze sharp and intense. "I know you have questions," she said, "but there are things you don't understand yet. Things you need to know." Daniel stood still, waiting for her to continue. His heart was racing, his mind racing with possibilities. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. "Who are you?" Daniel finally asked, the question that had been burning inside him for days. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes piercing through him. Then in a voice that was soft yet filled with undeniable power, she spoke. "My name is Queen Lyra," she said, "and I have been sent here for a reason. To find you." Daniel stood there, frozen, as Queen Lyra's words echoed in his mind. Her name. She had said it so calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Queen Lyra. The words didn't make sense to him, yet they carried an undeniable weight. His thoughts were racing, and 1,000 questions flooded his mind. Queen?
A queen? What kind of queen?
From where? The woman who had sat beside him on the train, the woman he had seen as just an ordinary commuter, was someone entirely different, someone beyond ordinary. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he even say? His mind was struggling to keep up with the sudden turn his life had taken. She seemed to understand the confusion on his face. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said, her voice steady but not unkind. "But you need to trust me, Daniel. I'm not just some stranger. I have a mission here, and you're part of it." Daniel blinked, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "A mission?" he finally managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," she replied, her eyes never leaving his. "A mission to protect this planet. Your world. From something far more dangerous than you could imagine." Daniel's heart began to race. His entire life, all the ordinary routines and patterns he had known, suddenly felt insignificant. He wasn't sure whether to be afraid or intrigued. But something in her eyes told him that fear wouldn't help him now. She had already drawn him into something much bigger than himself. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, his voice shaky. He couldn't help it. The whole situation was beyond anything he could have imagined. Just a few days ago, he had been a man riding a train to work, living an ordinary life. And now? Now he was standing in a dark alley with a woman who claimed to be a queen. "There are forces out there," she said. "Forces that want to destroy everything you've known. Earth is not as isolated as you think. We've been watching you, protecting you from the shadows. But now, things have changed. The danger is real, and it's closer than you know." Daniel didn't know how to respond. He had always thought of Earth as just one tiny part of the universe, but now he was being told that the universe was not only aware of Earth, but that some force was out there threatening it. It felt impossible to believe, yet standing before him was a woman who exuded authority, someone who seemed to know far more than anyone else. "You're not just a passenger on a train," she continued. "You're more than that. You have a part to play in all of this." Daniel's mind was spinning. "What do you mean I'm just a guy? I work at a desk. I'm nothing special." Queen Lyra stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "That's what you think. But that's not who you are. You've been chosen." He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "Chosen? Chosen for what?" he wanted to ask, but the words seemed to get stuck. His world had been turned upside down, and it was hard to keep track of everything she was saying. "Chosen for what?" he asked finally, his voice sounding more confident now, though still uncertain. "You're part of the resistance," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Part of the effort to stop the invasion." Daniel's mind raced. Resistance, invasion. He could feel a cold sweat starting to form on his brow. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of joke. But the look in her eyes told him she wasn't joking. This was serious. This was real. "Why me?" Daniel asked, almost too afraid to hear the answer. "You have qualities that make you perfect for this," she said. "You're not bound by what others think. You see the world differently. You think for yourself. You're resourceful, and you're capable of handling things when most would run away. That's why you were chosen." Daniel didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. All he knew was that he was standing at the edge of something enormous. He had been living an ordinary life, and now everything had changed. The world he knew had been a lie, and it seemed like the truth was something he couldn't even begin to comprehend. "So what happens now?" Daniel asked, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. Lyra's expression softened slightly. "Now we prepare. We fight. You don't need to understand everything right away, Daniel. But you'll be trained and you'll learn. I'll be with you every step of the way." She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a small device, unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It was sleek, metallic, and glowed with a faint blue light. "This will help you understand what's coming," she said. "It will give you the information you need, but it's not just about information. It's about action. Earth is in danger, and you are the key." Daniel looked at the device in her hand, his mind still reeling. "Action?" he repeated, trying to make sense of it. "What kind of action? I don't know anything about fighting, or whatever this is." Lyra smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her expression. "I'll teach you. You're not alone in this, and you're not the only one who's been chosen. There are others scattered across Earth who are part of this resistance. But you?" She paused, looking him squarely in the eye. "You have something they don't. A unique ability to adapt, to think on your feet." Daniel swallowed hard. He didn't feel special. He didn't feel like anything. But there was something in the way she spoke that made him want to believe her. Something in the way she looked at him. Maybe it wasn't just about him. Maybe he was part of something bigger. "What do we do first?" Daniel asked, finally finding his voice. Lyra's eyes narrowed, and for the first time there was a flicker of something darker in her gaze. "We stop the invaders before they reach Earth, and we start by gathering the resistance. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, and the clock is ticking." Daniel felt his heart skip a beat. The weight of her words hit him like a wave. The world was on the verge of something huge. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but there was no turning back now. Lyra stepped forward, placing the glowing device in his hand. "The first step starts with you. Are you ready?" Daniel looked at the device, feeling its cool surface in his palm. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just a bystander anymore. He wasn't just going to work every day. He wasn't just riding the train. His life had changed in ways he couldn't even fully understand. But one thing was clear. He was part of something important now. And whether he was ready or not, he was going to have to face whatever came next. Daniel stood in the alleyway, holding the glowing device in his hand, his mind still racing. He had barely processed everything that had happened over the past few days. Queen Lyra, the woman he had shared train rides with, the woman who seemed so ordinary, was now at the center of a battle far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The world as he had known it seemed like a distant memory now. Earth was in danger, and Daniel, an ordinary office worker, was suddenly a part of something extraordinary. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just been swept up in a storm he didn't fully understand, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back. Not now. Lyra stood in front of him, her posture calm and steady, her eyes focused on him with an intensity that made his heart race. She had told him that he was part of the resistance, that he had been chosen. But what did that really mean? What was he supposed to do? What was this device she had given him, and how could it possibly help him in a fight against something as big as an invasion? "Are you ready?" Lyra asked, her voice soft yet firm. There was no hesitation in her tone. She wasn't asking if Daniel was scared or uncertain. She was simply asking if he was willing to take the first step. He stared at the device in his hand. It was sleek and alien, with a subtle glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. He didn't understand how it worked, but somehow he felt like it was important. The weight of it, the coolness of the metal, made him realize that this was no ordinary object. It was something powerful, something beyond his comprehension. "I don't know if I'm ready," Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't sure what he was getting into. The thought of fighting against something as vast as an alien invasion felt overwhelming, but deep down, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Lyra's gaze softened, and she stepped closer to him. "You don't have to be ready," she said. "None of us are when we start, but you're stronger than you think. You'll learn, and you'll adapt, and you won't be alone." Her words gave him a sense of comfort, but the uncertainty was still there. He had always lived a life of routine, of predictability. He went to work, he rode the train, he met friends for drinks, but now his life had been thrust into chaos, and he was expected to be a part of something far bigger than himself. Was he really up for the challenge? "We don't have much time," Lyra continued, her voice growing more urgent.
"The invasion is coming, and it's already started."
Daniel's stomach tightened. "How?" he asked, his throat dry.
Lyra looked him in the eye.
"The enemies we're facing are already among us. They've infiltrated key positions, waiting for the right moment to strike. The first wave will be subtle. They'll try to weaken us from the inside, undermine our systems, create confusion and fear, but the real attack will come soon after. They'll make their move when they know humanity is divided, vulnerable." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of enemies hidden within their own society, waiting for the right moment to strike, was terrifying. He had no idea who they were or what they looked like, but the thought of an invasion starting from within made the threat feel much more real. "But we can stop it," Lyra said, as if reading his thoughts. "We have the technology, the knowledge, and the people to fight back. But we need to act quickly. The resistance is already mobilizing, but we're running out of time. The longer we wait, the stronger they become." She reached out, taking the device from Daniel's hand and pressing it against his palm. "This is a key. It will unlock the knowledge we need to fight back, but you'll need to use it carefully. It's powerful, but it's also dangerous. If we're not careful, it could fall into the wrong hands." Daniel nodded slowly, trying to process everything she was saying. He had no idea how to use the device, or even what it would do, but it seemed like his only chance. He didn't have the luxury of time. The world was at stake, and he had been pulled into this fight whether he was ready or not. "Where do we start?" Daniel asked, his voice steadier now, though his heart was still pounding in his chest. Lyra smiled, a small but reassuring gesture. "We start by finding the others. The resistance is spread out across the globe, hidden in plain sight. We'll need to make contact with them, gather intelligence, and figure out who's behind the invasion." She turned and began walking toward the alley's exit, motioning for Daniel to follow. "Come on. We have a long way to go, and the sooner we start, the better." As Daniel followed her, his mind was still spinning. The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in, but it felt surreal. A part of him still wanted to wake up from this nightmare, to return to his ordinary life, but he knew that wasn't possible. Not anymore. Lyra led him to a nearby vehicle, a sleek black car that looked nothing like anything he had seen before. It wasn't an ordinary car. It was far more advanced, with sharp lines and a quiet hum that seemed to vibrate through the air. "Get in," she said. "We'll be safer on the move. I've set up a temporary base where we can gather information and plan our next steps." Daniel hesitated for a moment before climbing into the passenger seat. He didn't know where they were going, but he had no choice but to trust Lyra. She seemed to know what she was doing, even if he had no idea what was happening. The car sped through the city, the streets flashing by as they took a series of turns Daniel couldn't track. He glanced at Lyra, who remained calm and focused, her eyes scanning the road ahead. After a while, the car pulled off the main roads and into a more secluded area, eventually stopping in front of a building that looked like an abandoned warehouse. It was dark and there were no signs of life around, but Daniel could sense that something important was hidden within. Lyra stepped out of the car and motioned for Daniel to follow. As they approached the building, she pressed a hidden button on the wall, and a large metal door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the warehouse was anything but abandoned. It was filled with equipment, computers, devices, maps, and all sorts of technology Daniel didn't recognize. People moved around, working quickly and efficiently as if they had been preparing for something monumental. "This is our base of operations," Lyra said, leading him into the center of the room. "We've got people stationed all over the world gathering intel and preparing for the resistance. We don't have much time to waste. The enemy will strike soon." Daniel looked around at the people working diligently, some talking in low voices, others focused on their screens. They looked like ordinary people, just like him. But he knew better now. These were the people who were fighting to save the world, and somehow he was one of them. Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. "We need to work quickly, Daniel. The sooner we act, the better our chances." Daniel nodded, the weight of her words settling on him. He was in this now. There was no turning back. And whatever came next, he would have to face it head on. The world was at stake, and he had a part to play in saving it.